Hope you enjoy part 7. As Harry was down in the Chamber of Secrets, Daphne was trying to finish her week's assignments in the Slytherin common room. It had been one of the roughest weeks she had ever experienced in all her time at the ancient school. Everywhere she went, she had endured the whispers, and strange, almost pitying looks that her housemates sent her way. She had known from the beginning that there would be whispers and pointed looks, but she had been truly unprepared for what she was experiencing now. On top of that, every other student seemed to stop whatever they were doing as she passed. It all started on Monday morning when she had been walking next to Harry on the way to Transfiguration and the hall had exploded in whistles, catcalls and vomiting sounds. Harry looked apologetic as they entered the classroom. The rest of the week she had avoided Harry, only to avoid the outbursts. But the whispers continued. Several times she'd walked into the girls' loo only have girls looking coldly at her. Normally this didn't bother her at all, but for some reason she felt like she was constantly being examined. It was becoming increasingly annoying. She had overheard a few Ravenclaw girls in the library whispering about how Daphne must have somehow slipped Harry a love potion, or by some other means enchanted him. Daphne had to stifle the urge to run around the shelves and start ripping their hair out. It would have gained nothing, save to fuel the rumors further. Then, there were the talks her fellow housemates felt obligated to give her. Several seventh-year girls had come by to check on her and then spent atrocious amounts of time insulting Gryffindors, and Harry in particular. Daphne wondered with each girl how much they truly despised Harry, and how much of their rants were based in jealousy. But, the very worst part of the week had been that she had not spent any time alone with Harry. In fact, she'd avoided him altogether. She had backed out of their weekly meeting, lying about the amount of homework she had to take care of. She had seen the look of disappointment on his face when he had read the letter she had sent through Hermione, and when she thought about it, she always felt really bad. Now, as she was proofreading her essay for defense class, all she could think of was spending some time with the boy who she was destined to marry. Daphne felt guilty for brushing Harry off. She felt angry that she had not had the guts to walk with him and ignore everyone else. And, she was filled with a longing to be near Harry once again. To be able to talk with him, to stare into his dazzling green eyes, and even to be held by him. No. She said to herself, shaking her head clear. Her mind was doing that more often these days. She'd begin thinking about Harry, and almost inevitably be swallowed into a fantasy of snogging the messy-haired, green-eyed boy. She found she was having more arguments with herself, and was beginning to wonder if crazy people knew the moment they had gone mad. Tracy had, of course, been no help whatsoever, as she chided her best friend for her cowardice. Daphne and Tracy had not spoken to each other for a few days, as they had an argument of Daphne's course of action regarding her and Harry. "I think you're being really childish. So what if people make remarks? Get used to it. He is the boy who lived for Merlin's sake. It's never going to get better," Tracy had scolded. This had led Daphne to make several disparaging remarks over Tracy's apparent lack of love life. Tracy countered with comments over Daphne's lack of experience with boys, and that being the reason for her hesitation with Harry, which Daphne then retaliated to by commenting on Tracy's vast wealth of knowledge. Daphne had known she'd gone too far the moment she said it. Tracy's eyes brimmed with hurtful tears, and the auburn-haired girl had hid in the bathroom. Neither girl had spoken to the other for the next 2 days, and Daphne was feeling extremely lonely. Daphne was contemplating how she might make amends with her best friend, and how quickly she could do it, when Draco Malfoy sat in one of the big plush chairs in the common room. He had been looking sicker and sicker these days. His grey eyes had a sunken look to them, and his normally well-groomed hair was a total rat's nest. He appeared to perspire more, and he was more irritable than ever. As always, both Crabbe and Goyle had followed their leader into the common room, but Daphne noticed that both boys put as much distance between themselves and Draco as they could. This behavior had been remarked upon several times over the past month, as there seemed to be an invisible wedge being driven between Draco and his two cohorts. "So, Greengrass," he said in his customary drawl, "did you ever find out what Potter slipped you? I mean, it's obvious to everyone that you were slipped some kind of love potion. There can be no other explanation for it. Why on earth would you lower yourself to going anywhere near Potter?" Daphne set her quill down gently, and took a deep calming breath before she looked into Draco's hard eyes. Draco had been a thorn in most of the house's side for years. He was nothing but a bully, a low-life scum who'd been born with a silver spoon in his arse. Yet, no one ever stood up to him, for fear that he might run screaming to his daddy, and there would be some sort of retribution. It was widely discussed how Draco had bought his way onto the house Quidditch team, and that the team had suffered for it. The only games they won were because they had gained a very significant lead before the other team had managed to catch the snitch. That was only one example of Draco's bravado. There were many more examples of Draco's lack of skill, or even common sense. "No, Draco," Daphne said calmly, and coldly. "You're quite mistaken. I was not given anything." "Really?" Draco's eyebrows shot up. "Well, we might be able to finally get rid of old Scarhead, then. After all, the Imperius Curse is illegal. Perhaps you should speak with Professor Snape about it?" Draco smiled malevolently. "You seem to be confused, Draco." Daphne shook her head. "I went of my own free will." Draco threw his head back as he laughed. Daphne noticed more and more of her housemates were beginning to watch. Daphne felt her temper rising as Draco laughed. She had been desperately trying to shrink into the shadows so people would forget about her and Harry, and Draco was shining a spotlight right on her. "I never knew you could be so hilarious," Draco said when he finally stopped laughing. "Seriously, why would you sink so low? You could have been with someone of standing. Someone with strength, and power. Like me, for instance." "You?" Daphne looked at him oddly. "Why, Draco, I never imagined you would ever be interested in me." She feigned awe, and then glared at the pompous little snit. "Draco, I would never be so desperate to allow myself to be touched by a man who got their thrills flailing on top of Pansy like a hippogriff in heat." "You sicken me, Draco." Daphne sniffed airily. Draco leaned forward in the chair, eyeing the blonde dangerously. His gray eyes burned with displeasure. "I'd be very careful what you say to me. You have no idea of what I'm capable of. With a snap of my fingers, I could." "What, Draco? What could you do?" Daphne questioned. "Your father's in prison. You have no more money, because the Wizengamot seized everything. And, let's be honest, your prowess with a wand is slightly better than your lackey's. So, what could you possibly do?" "I'm not one you should trifle with," Draco said menacingly. Daphne stared at him for a moment, and then burst out laughing. "What are you? Some kind of fairy tale villain? Tell me, oh dastardly one, what is your latest scheme?" Several other Slytherins laughed along with Daphne as Draco's face grew red with rage. He stood up and kicked the table over. Daphne shrieked as she tried to grab her essay, which landed in the fire, bursting into flame. "You bloody prat!" she screamed. "I'm warning you, Greengrass. You'd better learn to show respect to your betters." Daphne stood now and got nose to nose with the Slytherin prince. You don't even know what that word means. You think just because of who your father was that you deserve to have people worship you as you strut all over the castle. You're nothing more than a spoiled little child, Draco. You're not my better. You're pathetic. Draco shoved Daphne back and pulled out his wand, aiming it at the girl sprawled on the floor. Daphne shot to her feet and slapped the wand out of Draco's hand and punched him in the eye. There were yells and cheers as Draco staggered back. Daphne had her wand leveled at Draco's face now. Draco looked surprised by Daphne's actions, but his look of shock soon faded, and his eyes grew cold. He straightened his shirt and backed up slowly, never daring to take his eyes off the girl. Daphne watched him bend down and collect his wand, keeping her gaze on the evil bastard, who was now smiling coolly at her. You're going to regret this, Greengrass. Very soon. I'd watch out, if I were you. Draco smiled as he gave a mock bow and disappeared into the boys' dormitories. Daphne finally lowered her wand, replacing it in her cloak. She turned to look at the fire where her defense essay was nearly gone. She sighed, knowing that she'd have to spend nearly the whole of her Saturday in the library to redo it. She felt her shoulders sag in resignation and she bent to begin picking up the rest of her things that had been tossed across the floor. Daphne! Look out, someone cried. Daphne stood up and turned around just as a spell hit her in the midsection. She never heard the spell, but she felt it hit her on her left side and send her flying head over heels to crash through a nearby chess table. As she looked up, Draco was already hovering over her, looking feral. You really think I would just give up like that? He sneered. Daphne went for her wand, but Draco stomped on her hand as it flew into her robes. Draco's foot crushed her hand, and her chest. Daphne swore she felt a rib crack with the force of it. She was also convinced that her wand had snapped. Draco bent down and opened her robes and took the wand from her and tossed it away. Daphne was a bit relieved to see her wand was intact. Draco then gave a long meaningful look about the common room, where no one seemed to be inclined to help Daphne. It was the first time she'd ever regretted not making more friends within her house. This is a warning to anyone else who thinks they can insult me and get away with it. Daphne had never felt anything like what she felt the moment she looked into Draco's sinister-looking eyes. He had attacked her from behind, and he had kicked her in the chest. He had acted exactly as she would have expected, and felt a little angry that she had let her guard down so quickly. But, more than that, she felt frightened of what he might do. She imagined if there was no one else around, Draco might try to take advantage of his present situation. Thankfully, nearly every eye in the common room was on the two of them. And then, something caught her eye. As Draco stood over her, wand aimed right between her eyes with his right hand. Daphne began looking about for a way out of her situation, and that's when she noticed the sleeve on Draco's left arm was up a bit and, standing out quite well on his pallid flesh, was a dark shadow. A shadow that seemed to be moving, almost as if it were alive. Could it be he's really been marked? She thought to herself. Daphne tried to think of a way she could expose his arm and see for sure, to prove if Harry was right, if Draco was simply trying to make himself important again. All of that was pushed from her mind when Draco bent down, his face mere inches from hers. I'm going to teach you a lesson you won't ever forget, you little bitch. Stupefy. Draco was hit in the side of the head by the stunning spell, and fell in a heap on top of Daphne, who screamed bloody murder for someone to get him off of her. Daphne was never so grateful to see Tracy Davis. Tracy had been in her dorm, as she and Daphne were still not talking to one another. She had been unaware of the altercation between Draco and her best friend, until Millicent Bulstrode came huffing into their dorm shouting that Daphne needed help. Tracy had gotten to her feet and raced into the common room, just in time to see Draco aiming his wand over Daphne, who looked as if she'd been thrown into the table, which was now splintered and broken around the blonde girl on the floor. Tracy had not hesitated and whipped out her wand and sent a stunning spell at Draco, hoping her aim was good, and the spell was strong. Her aim at least proved to be somewhat accurate, as she had been aiming for Draco's backside. The spell, however, wasn't as powerful as she had hoped. As she was helping Daphne out from under the prone body, Draco began to stir. Daphne retrieved her wand and cast her own spell at Draco's wand hand. The bludgeoning spell shattered the boy's wand hand. Draco shot up, screaming with pain. Draco tried to get to his feet, but Daphne stunned him again, smiling a little coldly as he fell in another heap. "What is going on in here?" Professor Snape demanded as he stepped into the common room. Daphne noticed two first-year students looking frightened standing just off to the head of house's side. Daphne guessed that they had gone to retrieve the professor for help. "Malfoy attacked Daphne, Sir," Tracy said frankly, still watching to see if the little ferret moved. "Was this an unprovoked attack, Miss Greengrass?" Snape questioned curtly. Daphne had never felt anything but respect for her head of house, until this moment. She felt his eyes boring into hers, and she felt tainted, dirty. "He attacked me from behind, sir, then he stomped on my chest and threw my wand. He said he was going to teach me a lesson," Daphne said, finding it a bit difficult to breathe. She was almost sure she had a cracked rib, and her left breast was pulsing with pain. "So, you thought breaking his hand was proper retaliation?" "For attacking me from behind and stomping on my boob, no. I should have severed his bits." "Enough. Miss Greengrass, you will report to my office tomorrow evening for detention," Snape said as he levitated Draco's prone body and began taking him to the hospital wing. He stopped when he noticed Daphne and Tracy following. "Where do you think you're going?" Snape looked angry. "To the hospital wing. I'm having trouble breathing, and I want to make sure he didn't break a rib or anything." "Very well," Snape said, and they left the common room to whisper and gossip over what they had witnessed. "Severus, what's happened?" Madame Pomfrey questioned as Snape lowered Draco's body onto the first bed he came to. "A little spat in Slytherin. I believe his hand is broken. Also, Miss Greengrass thinks she has a problem with her ribs." "Very well, over there." Pomfrey pointed to a nearby bed. Tracy sat down next to Daphne, who was looking quite pale now. "That little ferret." Daphne spat as she sat gingerly, trying not to aggravate her ribs, which felt as if they were becoming more and more constricted with each breath. "What'd you expect?" Tracy questioned. "Draco can't fight unless the odds are in his favor." "What happened, anyway?" "He started insulting Harry and telling me I should be with him. I told him exactly what I thought of that idea, and then he kicked over the table, and my essay landed in the fire. I punched him, and we pulled wands on each other. He left, and as I went to pick up my things, he attacked." "How'd you get there in time, anyway?" "Millie came and got me," Tracy said with a hint of worry. "Remind me to get her the biggest slab of chocolate they have at Honeyduke's the next time we visit Hogsmeade." Daphne smiled lightly. "It's so unfair that you're getting detention. Draco probably won't get any punishment." Tracy sighed, looking over to where Pomfrey was attending to the boy. Draco was conscious again, and glaring hard at Daphne. That was the moment it hit her. Daphne looked up to see Snape leaving quickly, which made Daphne feel that this was most likely the best time to act. She remembered seeing something on Draco's left arm, and Harry's theory about Draco pledging himself to Voldemort repeated in her mind. Tracy, it's still illegal to bear the mark, right? The dark mark? I think so. Then, Tracy's eyes lit up as she understood what Daphne was thinking. What if he's not marked, though? Then nothing. I serve my detention, and have to watch my back a little more carefully. So, how do we get him to show it? Tracy asked, but Daphne was already on her feet and striding with agonizing determination towards Draco and Pomfret. Madame Pomfret, you should really examine his left forearm, Daphne said. Madame Pomfret looked up, a little confused. Why should I do that? Because, I think you'll find a very serious injury there, Daphne said, staring at Draco, who looked ready to spit fire. He's been grasping his arm a lot, and I'm worried about him. You're worried? Wasn't it you that broke his hand? Yes, Madame Pomfret, but friends sometimes fight. I'm really worried about him. Madame Pomfret was a very intelligent woman, it was not to be denied. Yet, she was extremely susceptible to manipulation, if it was done right. Well, let's have a look, then, the nurse said, reaching for Draco's left arm, which he immediately pulled out of reach. He looked up at Daphne, and she was convinced that had he the ability to burn her with his eyes, she would be nothing more than a smoldering pile of ash at his feet. Leave me alone, I'm fine. He spat. Come now, Mr. Malfoy, let's have a look, Madame Pomfret insisted. Keep away from me, you hag. He shouted now, trying to get out of the bed. Come on, Draco, Daphne urged. Let her fix you all up. How did you find out? He said as he tried to keep the school nurse at bay. Pansy doesn't know how to keep a secret, Tracy said as she came over to watch what happened, unaware that Daphne had glimpsed it earlier. Mr. Malfoy, if you don't sit down and let me examine your injury, I will have to put you out, Madame Pomfret warned. Don't touch me. I'm fine. They're lying, Draco ranted, but Madame Pomfret took out her wand and hit Draco with yet another stunning spell. I do hate fussy patients, she remarked, as she levitated Draco back onto the bed. She bent over her patient and rolled up his sleeve. Oh, Merlin, save me, she gasped. She stood up and conjured tight ropes around Draco, tying him down. The school nurse bustled to her office, leaving Daphne and Tracy alone with the blonde Slytherin bully. Both girls came around to see what had made the school nurse tie Draco down. Neither girl had ever seen the mark before, except at the Quidditch World Cup, of course. But that seemed almost a joke, compared to seeing someone bearing the sinister tattoo on their arm. It was unmistakable. A wicked-looking skull with a serpent sliding out of its fanged mouth. The tattoo seemed very alive. It looked to be moving, like a leaf of a pond, riding the little waves in a breeze. Wow! Tracy whispered, a hint of awe in her voice. Harry really was right. And perhaps this isn't the only thing he was right about. Daphne nodded. After a few moments, Madame Pomfret returned, her wand still in her hand. You ladies step away from him, this instant. Daphne went to a nearby bed and sat down heavily, wheezing hard as her ribs tightened. Madame Pomfret, could you please look at Daphne? She's having a hard time breathing, Tracy asked of the nurse, who would not divert her attention at the bound man in the bed. The infirmary doors opened and Professor McGonagall and Professor Sprout entered, looking astonished and determined. Professor Snape entered a second behind the other two. Are you sure about what you saw, Poppy? McGonagall asked. Madame Pomfret leaned over Draco's bed and showed the three professors the mark. McGonagall and Sprout both clapped hands to their mouths, while Snape looked as if he'd just had needles stuck in him. It suddenly occurred to her that he had known. It was why they argued before the holiday on the night of Slughorn's party. Snape knew that Draco was working for you-know-who, and wanted to help him. Daphne wanted to say something, but Madame Pomfrey came to her then, and pushed her flat on the bed, and began her diagnosis. Daphne had been correct in her assumption. Madame Pomfrey told her that 2 ribs were cracked and there was quite a bit of bruising. The school matron went off to fetch some potions, and Daphne saw Professor Snape rush out of the infirmary. Daphne wondered if the greasy-haired man was planning an escape. Harry raced all the way to Dumbledore's office. He had Slughorn's memory in his hand and he was finally going to get Dumbledore to stop with this farce and actually train him so he could defeat Voldemort. He gave the password and dashed up the spiral stairs to the headmaster's office door. When Dumbledore allowed him to enter, Harry set the tiny vial on the desk and looked proudly at the headmaster. "Very well done, Harry." Dumbledore stood, taking the vial and holding it up to the light. "If I may ask, how were you able to do it?" "I appealed to his nature, and his pocketbook. He's now the proud owner of a basilisk corpse." "Oh my, very well played. Yes, Horace will be able to make quite a bit of gold selling anything he can harvest. I must say, I didn't expect something so cunning," Dumbledore said, peering over his half-moon spectacles, his bright blue eyes twinkling madly. "I had help from a very sly young woman." "Indeed?" Dumbledore began sidling around his desk, smiling knowingly at Harry. "Very well, as you have kept your word, so shall I keep mine. This will be the last memory you will have to examine. When we emerge, I will summarize everything for you, and together we will come up with a course of action. If you will." "Albus, we have a problem," Snape said as he barged into the headmaster's office. "He's been discovered." Dumbledore looked at the defense teacher for several seconds, memory vial held over the pensive, ready to be poured. Harry could only look between the 2 men and wonder who he was. "I see," Dumbledore said finally, as he put the cork back in the little vial. "Where is he now?" "The infirmary. There was an altercation in my house," Snape said. This made Harry even more curious, and he thought of Daphne. Perhaps she had seen what had happened. Unfortunately, he had no way of contacting her while she was in her common room. "Then, we must try our best to resolve this." "Who else knows?" the headmaster queried. "Pomfrey, Sprout and McGonagall. 2 students as well." "That makes things more difficult," Dumbledore said softly before turning to Harry. "It seems that we shall have to postpone our lesson for tonight, Harry." "I am needed in the infirmary." Harry nodded and with a disappointed smile, left Snape and Dumbledore. Harry felt a bit cheated, as he had finally gotten the memory that Dumbledore had wanted so badly, only to be shoved aside when Snape had come in. He wondered what could have been more important to Dumbledore than that stupid memory he'd been harping on about for over a month. Then, bits of what Snape had said began seeping into his mind. There had been an altercation in Slytherin House. He had been found out. Harry's mind began coming up with different reasons why Snape might be so agitated about someone being found out, and what that could entail. And then, all the tumblers fell into place. Draco Malfoy was surely the he that Snape had referred to. Harry was running towards the infirmary before he'd decided to. Then, he got very angry, and he wouldn't let me examine him. I had no choice but to stun him. That's when I saw it." Madame Pomfrey finished giving her report to Dumbledore, who looked almost serene. "Thank you, Poppy. You did the right thing. A student, Albus. He could have done any number of things," McGonagall said, her voice trembling. We must call the Auror straight away. I do not believe that to be necessary, Minerva. Though he's been marked, we have no reason to believe Mr. Malfoy has done anything harmful or illegal. We do not even know if he took the mark of his own free will. Have you gone round the twist? Pomona Sprout was stunned. Albus, no one takes the mark unwillingly. You know that. You can't mean to let him stay here. McGonagall asked incredulously. Just because he's never been caught in anything more dangerous than provoking other students doesn't mean he's not done anything. We all know what Mr. Malfoy is capable of. Be that as it may, we have no proof of any wrongdoing, and so we cannot just assume the worst. Mr. Malfoy is still only a boy, and we do not know if he took the mark willingly. Daphne had been listening to this from her bed, and scoffed at the headmaster's obvious manipulation. For some reason, known only to himself, Dumbledore was hell-bent on keeping Malfoy within Hogwarts. It stood to reason that Dumbledore had at least some idea of what Malfoy had been up to, and given how fast Snape had run off to fetch the headmaster, the head of Slytherin was in on it. "Excuse me," Daphne said, sitting up in her bed. "But, he did attack me tonight. He might have really hurt me if Tracy hadn't stepped in." "How do you know that for sure, Miss Greengrass?" Dumbledore said in a very condescending tone. "Perhaps he only meant to frighten you." "Is that what you call attacking someone from behind?" "I've got a footprint bruise on my boob from him stomping on it, and 2 cracked ribs." "You didn't see the look in his eyes, sir. He meant to do more than frighten." "Albus, you must follow the law. He's taken the mark, and he's taken it recently. It must be reported to the Aurors," Professor Sprout said sternly. "If you do not do it, then I shall." "She won't be alone, either." McGonagall fixed the old man with a firm stare, and Dumbledore sighed wearily. "If you only understood." "Understood what?" Harry Potter asked as he entered the infirmary. "What the hell are you doing here, Potter?" Snape's lip curled menacingly. "You've no business down here. Get away from Malfoy." Harry had snuck into the infirmary while the teachers were bickering amongst themselves. He had spotted Malfoy, who was still unconscious and tied to his bed. Harry felt a surge of curiosity and sidled closer to inspect the boy who'd been a great thorn in Harry's side since the first day of school 5 years ago. Draco's left arm was exposed, and Harry could see the dark mark quite clearly. Harry's heart gave a double beat and his stomach lurched. Though he'd suspected it for a long time, it was still a bit of a shock to be proven right. "I came to check on Daphne," Harry said quickly. "You said that there had been an altercation, and I was worried it might have been Daphne." "It looks like I was correct." Daphne's countenance brightened when she heard Harry's voice, and she felt a warmth spread throughout her when she saw him come around the bickering teachers. Harry approached his betrothed and sat down next to her. Daphne clasped his hand in hers, and smiled softly. "You never answered my question, sir." "Harry, I'm sorry, but this matter does not concern you," Dumbledore said, a bit dismissively. Harry felt irritation at being forestalled. He cast a hard look at the headmaster and spoke in as even a tone as he could manage. "Sir, with all due respect, the matter does concern me, as I tried to tell you back in September of my concerns over Malfoy. Time and time again we go through this. I tell you of my suspicions, and you wave them off as little more than nonsense. And every time, I'm proven right. Are we simply destined to repeat ourselves and learn nothing from our pasts? The proof is right in front of you." Harry pointed to where Malfoy lay. Dumbledore's trademark eye twinkle vanished, as Harry used the words Dumbledore had said in their first lesson. Though Dumbledore was very proud of Harry for becoming stronger, becoming more independent. Right now, it was a problem. Dumbledore wanted to keep Malfoy safe, by keeping him within the walls of the school. He had been aware that Malfoy had taken the mark, as Snape has informed him the very night it had happened. He had also been aware that Draco had been given a secret mission from the Dark Lord, and exactly what that mission entailed. Dumbledore had tried to have Snape monitor the boy's progress, but Malfoy had proven to be quite stealthy, and progress reports revealed very little. But Dumbledore's plans had all gone up in flames tonight, as Malfoy had been revealed to several teachers. They would not rest until the safety of the rest of the students was secured by having Malfoy remanded into Auror custody for trial. On top of that, Harry Potter, the only hope for the wizarding world, had come into his own, which had been Dumbledore's goal, but it had happened much sooner than he'd imagined. There was still so much he had to impart on the young man, and now Dumbledore wondered if the boy would even listen. He had to make a decision now. If he tried to remain on his original course, Dumbledore would alienate all those he had entrusted with saving the wizarding world, and all hope would be lost in that moment. The headmaster had little choice. "No, Harry." Dumbledore sighed. "You aren't seriously going to listen to the brat, are you?" Snape asked, anger clear on his sallow face. "If you do this, Albus, we could lose everything." "I'm afraid we have little choice, Severus." "Pomona, would you be so kind as to contact the Aurors?" Professor Sprout left the infirmary just as Snape began screaming. "Are you out of your mind? You know what this will mean." Snape's black eyes were bulging and his sallow skin was burning red with his indignant rage. "I do. It seems we must alter our earlier plans. Severus, would you be so kind as to join Harry and myself in my office in half an hour? The three of us have some very important things to discuss, and I'm afraid they can no longer wait," Dumbledore said gently. Snape looked murderous at Harry, but nodded his consent, and with one final look of disgust at Harry, swept out of the hospital wing. Harry, Dumbledore looked suddenly very old. His body seemed to sag, and his eyes looked incredibly tired. "I ask that you come to my office in half an hour. See to your friend, and then join Professor Snape and myself." Harry nodded and Dumbledore left, looking very tired and careworn suddenly. "Well done," Daphne said softly as Harry sat next to her. "I didn't do anything, really." Harry smiled gently back. He was already backed into a corner. "Maybe so, but you were able to push him just enough to make him make the right decision," Daphne said, staring at Malfoy's bound form. "You were right, you know. He was marked." "Yeah, I saw it. But we still don't know what he was trying to do." Harry sighed. "Are you okay?" "Yeah. Just bruised." Daphne sighed. "I really wish you could have exposed him without getting hurt." "So do I, but that's how it happened. Listen. I want to apologize for avoiding you all week. I thought I could handle all the rumors, but I wasn't expecting the looks and whispers and all that. I tried to warn you." Harry smiled. "I know, and I guess I thought you were being paranoid." "That's two things you were right about. You must have some sort of gift." "It's more a curse than anything else." Harry grinned a little. "Well, I promise never to doubt you again." Daphne smiled, placing her hand on his, grasping it gently. Harry intertwined his fingers with hers, and they both sighed softly. "I haven't been able to stop thinking about you," Daphne admitted softly, refusing to meet his eyes. "I really wanted to see you, but I just couldn't. I guess I was just too afraid." "Of all the rumors." "Partly. But I was also afraid of what might happen when I saw you." She looked up now, and found his soft green eyes watching her carefully. She was about to say something more when she found herself leaning into to him. Her lips met his in a gentle, sweet, longing kiss. She could feel his arm slide around her and pull her closer to him. Her mind went blank, and her body took over, as she kissed him a bit more urgently, her hands running through his messy black hair. Harry had not expected it. She looked up at him, her eyes smoldering, but not in the way he was used to. There was something soft in them. And then, she had leaned into him and pressed her lips to his. Again, he found himself lost in the kiss. He wanted her as close to him as possible, and found himself pulling her tight to him, to which she responded with a gentle moan. Slowly, the kiss became deeper, more passionate. Neither teen wished to stop, luxuriating in fervid moments they were now sharing. Unfortunately, they began to run out of much-needed oxygen, and had to part their mouths. "See, I was afraid that might happen," Daphne whispered. "I'm terribly afraid of all this." "Good, so it isn't just me." Harry smiled softly. "What do we do now?" Daphne looked into his smoky green eyes. "Take things slow, I guess. This is really new for me, too." "Will you come see me tomorrow?" Daphne asked, sliding away from Harry, who was readying himself for his meeting with Snape and Dumbledore. "Yes," he said firmly. He stood up, still clutching her hand in his, reluctant to leave her now. She could only smile at him as he stared down at her, his eyes burning with emotion. Finally, without another word, Harry left, clinging to her hand until he could no longer, allowing it fall from his as he moved away. Daphne watched him leave the infirmary, and once again, the moment he was out of her sight, she felt an unwelcome emptiness descend upon her. She reflected the moment they had shared only minutes before. It had been better than the first time. Stronger, and more compelling. His arms had felt so strong and warm and safe around her. His lips tasted sweeter than the first time. She touched her lips with her fingertips, relishing the memory. She still stared at the door he'd left only seconds ago, wishing he'd come running back into her arms and kiss her once again. To sweep her up in his arms and never let her go. It was then that Daphne Greengrass realized that she might actually be trying to fool herself. That she did feel something more than mere friendship for him. That she desired him, craved him even. Daphne Greengrass admitted to herself that she might actually be falling for Harry Potter. It had been a very strange evening, to say the least. Harry had finally retrieved the memory from Slughorn, and now Dumbledore was supposed to teach him what he needed to know to defeat Voldemort. But then, Snape had burst into the office. Draco Malfoy had been outed thanks to his stupidity in trying to frighten Daphne. This had disrupted some grand scheme in which Harry knew that he was at the center of, yet he had no idea what it was. Dumbledore had then asked Harry to join he and Professor Snape in the headmaster's office for a meeting Harry was sure was going to be enlightening. But, after Dumbledore had left him alone in the infirmary with Daphne, who'd been hurt by Draco, though it hadn't been serious, Harry had felt the same concern and protectiveness as if it had been Ron or Hermione, yet it was stronger somehow. He had sat next to her and she had kissed him. Really kissed him. The only word that Harry could use to describe it was amazing, and he was sure that did nothing to truly describe it. Daphne's lips were just as sweet as he had remembered, and her body was so warm, and soft next to his. The way she had molded to him was so indescribably wonderful, he had felt as if his heart might stop. Harry had almost forgotten about meeting with the headmaster. All he had wanted to do was stay next to Daphne for the rest of the night. He was sure that she had felt the same, as she was so reluctant to let go of him. She had even asked him if he would come back. Harry now just wanted to get this meeting over with and try to get back to her before curfew. As he approached the door to Dumbledore's office for the second time that evening, the shrill tone of Snape's raised voice shook Harry back to reality. He'd gone and messed up the great scheme, and Harry was sure he was going to be made to pay for it. A fool. A crazy old fool. I agreed to your plan because I could see no alternative, but now. Severus, I have little time left, and the boy will still need help. You yourself told me of what you think Voldemort is planning for the coming days. The world will need you to protect it, and Harry will need you. I don't want to be the damned hero, Albus. There is no other choice. Our original plan has been ruined, so we must alter it. Would you prefer the alternative? I'd rather wash my hands of it all. This is no game. My life is very much on the line now. As is mine. And let us not forget the two boys as well. Harry could not have known what he was doing. Because you never told him. You keep all the facts to yourself and move people around like pawns on a chessboard. Enough. Harry actually jumped when he heard Dumbledore shout down the defense teacher. How dare you, Severus? Let us not forget how this all began. You came to me, remember? Harry wanted to stay there and let them continue, but knew it was only a matter of time before he was discovered listening in, and he didn't want to incur the wrath of Snape. So, with a heavy sigh, Harry rapped his fist on the door, which opened almost immediately. Harry noticed that Dumbledore still looked very tired and was trying very hard to hide his obvious irritation, while Snape looked ready to strike him down any moment. At last, we can begin. Harry, perhaps you'll be more comfortable sitting down. We have so much to cover, and I fear we won't get to it all tonight. Dumbledore smiled as he motioned to a chair for Harry to sit in. Snape began pacing back and forth, and Harry had to focus on Dumbledore for fear of becoming nauseous watching the man sweep back and forth like a pendulum. Harry, the old man began with a deep sigh. I have been trying these past few months to prepare you for something I am afraid I will be unable to finish. It is why I have been showing you these memories. I wanted to help you understand what Voldemort has become. And what is that, sir? Harry asked, hoping that they had finally come to it at last. He is a coward. A man so fearful of what is inevitable, that he has done unspeakable things to prevent it. Voldemort is afraid of his own mortality. So much so that he attacked a child of barely a year old in order to prevent his own demise. But it didn't work. Harry said, trying to understand. At least, it shouldn't have. But he didn't die. I'm really confused here, sir. You may have to use small words. Snape scowled. Severus, that is enough. Dumbledore's voice was hard. Harry, do you remember the first time we visited in Professor Slughorn's memory? Do you recall what Tom Riddle asked about? A Horcrux. Very good. I think it's time we learned what it is. Dumbledore said, rising from his seat. Harry gave a little sigh as he, too, stood and went to the pensive. Dumbledore stopped and looked at Snape, who stood with arms folded, a disgusted look on his face. This is something you should see as well. You will need to know all this as well. Dumbledore called out. Snape gave a grunt and came to join them. One at a time, each man stuck his head into the pensive, and were pulled into the memory of one Horace Slughorn. Harry observed once again the sight of Slughorn sitting at a table with several boys, one of which was a much younger, more human-looking Voldemort. Harry was impatient for the scene to play out so that he could finally get to the heart of the problem. When finally Voldemort asked the question that had made the memory go all fuzzy and strange the last time. What is a Horcrux, sir? Tom Riddle asked quite smoothly. Slughorn's face went ashen as he regarded the handsome man before him. The portly professor poured a large glass of brandy and took a large mouthful of the amber liquid, trying calm his nerves. My word, Tom, wherever did you find a reference to that? Slughorn said after a few moments. In the restricted section. The entry was most vague, and I knew if anyone would know more, it would be you. Well, you're right, I do. But why ever would you want to know more about it? It is a most horrible bit of magic. Very dark stuff, boy, very dark indeed. Slughorn was now wiping his sweaty forehead. Whatever a Horcrux was, it was making the potion's master quite nervous. Truly? What does it do? Riddle asked, a faint gleam of desire in his eye. Well, to be honest, it's a means to protect yourself from death. You see, in order to make a Horcrux, one needs to split their soul, ripping it in two, and putting one half in an object. If that person were struck down, he couldn't truly die, as part of him would be anchored on this plane, you understand. Slughorn said shakily. The subject seemed to be troubling him, but Riddle was either oblivious or simply did not care. I believe I've got the gist of it. But tell me, sir, can you only make one? Wouldn't it be better to make more? Perhaps 7? It is quite a strong magical number, so would it not make the Horcruxes stronger somehow? Merlin's beard, Tom! Slughorn cried as he nearly fell into his seat. Such questions. This really is a horrid topic. To even consider tearing your soul once is unspeakable. Why ever would a person want to do it more than once? Oh, Sir Riddle feigned concern. We're only speaking in theoretical terms here. I am simply curious on the matter. It is possible. Slughorn continued, looking a bit more relaxed. But I would think a terrible price would be paid for such an act. The soul is not meant to be torn apart. How would one even accomplish it? Riddle asked, his eyes hungry. Do you not know? In the most atrocious act possible. Murder. Riddle whispered. Harry could not help the shiver that ran down his spine. That is enough, I believe. Dumbledore said gently, and once again Harry found himself in the headmaster's office along with Snape and Dumbledore. Snape's demeanor had changed considerably. He looked as ashen-faced as Slughorn had in the memory. The greasy-haired defense teacher sat heavily in a nearby seat and cast his black eyes on Dumbledore, who was sitting in his own seat. He did it, didn't he? Snape questioned. That was the reason he didn't die that night, Snape said, inclining his head towards Harry. It's true. I knew the moment that Harry placed this on my desk 4 years ago. Dumbledore said as he placed an ink-stained, water-worn book, with a large cut in the cover on his desk. The diary was one of those. Harry said, pointing shakily at the diary. Horcruxes? Yes, it was, as was this. Dumbledore placed a small ring, with a cracked blackened stone on the desk. Snape stood up, his hand going to his mouth. That's what caused it? That's what is killing you? What? Harry shouted incredulously. Dumbledore cast a stern gaze at Snape, who looked pitifully shamed. You were not supposed to learn of that, yet, he said, holding Snape's eyes a moment longer. So now you know why I've been showing you all these memories. There are more I wish for you to see, as I think they are very important, but that can wait for the moment. We have other things that need to be discussed. Our situation has become quite shaky, Harry. One wrong move, and the whole of the wizarding world falls under Voldemort's boot heel. Part of that plan was to save Draco Malfoy. I do not believe he would have accomplished his mission. I had hoped that I could reach him before he went too far down the path of darkness. As it is, we cannot do that now, and I fear it may cost Professor Snape his life." "Because of the unbreakable vow?" Harry asked. "How the bloody hell do you know of that?" Snape wheeled around to face Harry, his black eyes burning with hatred. "It is of no importance how Harry knows. The fact that he does saves us time." Dumbledore tried to calm the heated teacher. "I've told you 1,000 times he's an arrogant little sod." "Why?" Harry said simply. Both Dumbledore and Snape turned to regard Harry. Snape was the first to regain his speech. "What did you say?" "I asked why. Why do you hate me so much? Ever since my first day, before I had even attempted a potion or magic or anything, you've had this wand planted in your arse about me. Yes, I know that you and my father hated each other. Yes, I know your life was a living hell because of him. But I am not my father." Snape looked ready to explode, but Dumbledore stepped in. "Severus, before you retort, which I can tell you are itching to do, why not answer the boy? Why not make him understand what it is that has caused you so much anguish and pain through the long years?" Snape set his burning gaze on the headmaster and grimaced. The two teachers stared each other down for what seemed an age before Dumbledore cleared his throat. "Perhaps another time, then. As it stands, we have other issues to address. Professor Snape promised to protect Mr. Malfoy. With Auror's coming, that vow will be broken, and Professor Snape will undoubtedly succumb to the effects of his promise. Harry, it is imperative that this does not happen." "But wouldn't he be safe in Azkaban?" Harry mused. "No one could hurt him there. The Dementors aren't even guarding it, so it is not that easy. I'm afraid that Draco Malfoy will have to make an escape before the Aurors arrive. I am sending him to Grimmauld Place." "What? How can you do that?" Harry snapped. "He's a vile little troll who deserves prison." "Who are you to judge?" Snape countered. This coming from the most snobbish, judgmental person in all of history. "Why, you snotty little—" "Enough." Dumbledore pounded his good hand on his desk. "I am quite sick of this bickering. Until you have explained yourself to Harry, Severus, I forbid you from insulting, or pestering Harry. And you, Harry, you must start to show some respect for a teacher of this school, even if you despise the man." Harry glared at Snape, who returned the gesture. "It's like you're both first years fighting over a quill. Draco Malfoy will be safe at Grimmauld Place. He will have Creaker there to keep him comfortable, but for all intents and purposes, it will be a prison. He will be allowed visits from Professor Snape for the foreseeable future. As you have already told me that the Order may continue using the house, I am exercising that right." Harry nodded, still burning with anger. "What about the Dark Lord?" Snape asked. "He will no doubt believe that Draco lost his nerve and fled. It is not the first time." Dumbledore rose, and went to his phoenix, Fawkes. After a whispered conversation, the bird rose into the air, and in a flash of fire, disappeared. "Now, then, our focus must be on hunting down and destroying all of Voldemort's Horcruxes. I am reasonably sure I have located another one, though I have been unable to get to it. Perhaps tomorrow evening, Severus, you would accompany on this errand." Snape nodded and Harry piped in irritably. "I want to go." Dumbledore regarded him for several moments, his eyes darting to Snape, who looked trepidatious of the idea. The old man leaned back in his seat and finally gave a short nod. "Very well. I believe it might be a good idea if you were to come. Tomorrow evening, meet with Professor Snape and myself in the Great Hall at 8 tomorrow evening. Bring your cloak. Now, if you will excuse us, Professor Snape and I still have much to discuss. Harry nodded and left the two men to their conversation. He had a lot to think about now. He had finally learned how Voldemort was able to cheat death. Harry's mind began to recall all the memories Dumbledore had shown him that had led up to the one he'd seen moments ago. A history of Voldemort, leading to him discovering a way to immortality. He created 3 of those soul anchors, 2 of which had been destroyed, and another they were going to get the next night. Then, something occurred to him. Voldemort had said 7. He had specifically asked Slughorn if 7 would be better. Harry stopped dead in his tracks. He knew without having to ask. Voldemort had created 7 Horcruxes. The diary and the ring had been destroyed, but there were still 5 more. Harry wondered if Dumbledore might already know where the others were, and how they might get them. Harry looked at his watch and his shoulders sagged a bit. It was after curfew, and he wasn't going to be able to visit Daphne until the morning. Harry sighed and made his way to Gryffindor Tower where Ron and Hermione would be. He had to tell someone about what he'd learned tonight. You didn't tell him, Snape said, sipping from the glass Dumbledore had poured him. No. No, it's not yet time, Dumbledore said a bit sadly. He has much to accomplish before he is told. Do you really think he'll do it as you planned? You underestimate him so much. If you could only get past your own prejudices, you'd see what the rest of your fellow teachers see. Harry is a very brave and selfless person. He will do what is required of him in the end. And what of the girl? You honestly think he'll give up everything, including her? I do. Miss Greengrass has not shown any strong feelings for Harry, nor does he seem to have any emotions towards her. They might form a friendship, but I doubt it will be anything more than that. Though I must say, learning that a betrothal contract existed between the two was very surprising. Fortunately, it didn't interfere with your plans. Snape sneered. Severus, I am getting the distinct impression that you are upset with how I've chosen to handle this situation. Really? Snape asked, voice dripping with sarcasm. What give you that impression? Severus, I have tried to think of any way that would allow Harry to lead a normal life. I have spent nearly all of my time in discovering Voldemort's secrets and trying to find a way he may be defeated. You yourself have admitted that Voldemort is an ingenious wizard. Through it all, there remains only one answer, and that is that all of his Horcruxes must be destroyed before Voldemort can be killed. All of his Horcruxes, including Harry Potter. You self-righteous bastard. Snape scowled. How can you be so dispassionate? He's a child. Why are you so concerned? Dumbledore countered angrily. You hate the boy. You are always harassing him, taunting and patronizing. Do not think I am unaware of how you treated him when I asked you to teach him occlumency. You used it as a way to take out your personal grudge on James Child. Your hands are no unclean either, Severus. Be that as it may, I am not the one preparing the savior of our world for sacrifice. Do you honestly believe it isn't breaking my heart? The boy is like a grandson to me. I would give up everything if I could find a way to eliminate that Horcrux inside of him, to relieve him of the burden. A burden he knows nothing about. Severus rose, hurling his glass at the fire, smashing it to shards. What good would it do to tell him now? Dumbledore asked of the defense teacher. Dumbledore's eyes were dark, and stung with tears. To tell him that he will never have the family he wishes for. For him to know that no matter what, he is going to die. What do you think that would do? He has to believe he's going to win. It's the only way we can accomplish what needs to be done. Harry must die at the hands of Lord Voldemort, and then, and only after all the Horcruxes are destroyed, you, my friend, you must kill him once and for all. Snape glared at the old man sitting behind the desk, and he felt himself overcome with a deep sadness. I promised to protect him, for Lily's sake. It has been the worst punishment imaginable. To see the image of James Potter every time I look at him. I hate him for what he represents, but I hate myself even more for what I did. I'm sorry, Albus, but I cannot believe that this is the only way. I will help him find and destroy all the Horcruxes. I will play the part we have set up, but I will not allow that boy to die. It is that very reason I have entrusted you with this task, Severus. I hope death takes you soon. Severus grimaced as he left the headmaster's office. Dumbledore sighed, staring at the closed office door. I'm afraid it will find me sooner than we are prepared for it to. Dumbledore raised his cursed hand, staring sadly at it. You look troubled. Daphne said to Harry, who was sitting next to her. He'd woken early, even though he'd gone to bed so late. Hermione and Ron had been waiting for him, and he had told them everything that had happened since dinner. Well, almost everything. Harry nodded. Can I help? Daphne asked as she took his hand, giving it a squeeze. I don't know. Harry shrugged. I don't know what I can tell you. I see. Daphne said, a little disappointed. I'm sorry. I don't want to be so secretive. But, I just don't want you hurt anymore. Harry, I did what I had to do. I wish I hadn't been so stupid about it, but it worked. Well, almost. What do you mean? Harry asked, thinking he already knew the answer. Well, there was this flash of light, and then Draco disappeared. I think someone helped him escape. Yeah. Harry said bitterly. It was Dumbledore. What? Ow. Daphne winced at the pain she'd caused sitting up so quickly. I thought Madame Pomfrey healed you. Harry asked with concern. She did, but I'm still a bit tender. I'll be fine, but you need to explain to me why Dumbledore helped Malfoy escape. To be honest, I don't understand it. He just believes the best of people. Even people who he shouldn't. He doesn't think Malfoy would have finished whatever Voldemort wanted him to do. So he's protecting Malfoy. Daphne shook her head and looked away from Harry. She was angry. She had risked her safety to expose Malfoy, even though that wasn't how it had started, but now the little rat was being protected by the supposed leader of the light. It's wrong. She said softly. He's wrong. Draco's dangerous. He doesn't know the Ponce like I do. He's a bully, and now he thinks he's got power. It doesn't stop there. Harry remarked. Daphne turned to see the confusion on Harry's face. You figured a lot of it out on your own, but I've never told you that you were right. I think you should know, you need to be aware of things. I'm afraid to tell you though. Why? Because I can't stop thinking about you. I mean your safety. I want you to be safe, and being around me isn't. Harry said sadly, staring at their intertwined hands. Daphne had almost missed the pained look on Harry's face. He had hidden it quickly, but he was unable to meet her eyes now. Harry, things are changing between us. I know that. I know that you feel it too. So this keeping secrets thing isn't going to work anymore. I don't want to force you, but as you said, my safety is in jeopardy. I know the you-know-who is. Voldemort. Harry said, cutting her off. What? Say his name. I can't. I. It's only a name. What are you afraid of? Daphne stared at Harry's determined green eyes, and wondered why she had been afraid of the name. She'd of course heard the stories, and she knew of the fear the name inspired, but she could not remember any reason for her to fear the name personally. Why had she followed so blindly and upheld this silly superstition about the name of a mentally deranged wizard? I know why Voldemort is after you. He believes you're this chosen one, or something. I also know he'll come after me just for being with you. But, I'm still here. Sitting right beside you. And I don't feel like I should be anywhere else. Harry looked into Daphne's stunning brown eyes, and felt the intensity of her words. He felt stronger because of them. He felt her soft, gentle hand squeeze his own, and he smiled at her. I don't know what this is, or what could happen. Daphne tilted her head as she spoke. But I like how I feel when I'm with you. I like talking to you, and I like that you actually listen to me. I like being with you, and I really like kissing you. She blushed. Harry felt himself going red at the same time. I like that too. So since we're going to married one day anyway, why not try and do this? As if there was no contract and we were just two people who might sort of have a thing for each other. She smiled. Okay. Harry nodded, smiling brightly now. I think I'd really like that. Good. Now tell me everything, and let's see if we can't figure this out. Harry nodded and began his story. He began by telling Daphne of the prophecy, and of his fight in the ministry. Daphne was shocked to learn that the mass murderer Sirius Black was not only Harry's godfather, but also innocent of his crimes. She felt bitter sadness when she heard Harry tell of Sirius' death, all because Dumbledore had not informed Harry of critical information that could have prevented the whole debacle. Harry then explained all about his lessons this year, which Daphne had already known about, but Harry had gone into far more detail, telling her all about Voldemort's Horcruxes. Daphne felt her skin grow cold when Harry had explained exactly what a Horcrux was and how it was made. Daphne tried to envision the making of one of these soul anchors, and felt nauseous at the idea. But the tale of his meeting the previous night had really made Daphne sit up, despite the pain she felt in her chest from Draco's foot. She was astonished to learn that Dumbledore and Snape had argued. But nothing prepared her for the revelation that Harry was going to accompany Snape and Dumbledore in seeking out one of the soul anchors that very evening. Wait, you're going with them? She asked, interrupting Harry. Yeah. Why? I'm sorry, but it seems suspicious to me. If Dumbledore has been trying to keep you safe, why let you go into some place that could be really dangerous? I know that you can handle it, and if he doesn't, then he's becoming senile. But it seems out of character somehow. I don't understand. Harry said, eyeing her perplexedly. Okay, if you had discovered all this on your own, and told him, Dumbledore would brush it off, and allow you and your friends to deal with it, just like the Ministry. But, this time it's like he's preparing you for something larger. Harry thought about it for a minute before he nodded. Yeah, I think you're right, but what can I do? You need to go, of course, but don't blindly follow him. Pay attention to everything he says and does. There's something larger going on here, Harry, something he's not telling you. Okay. I'll do my best. And you must be careful. I want to know everything that happens. Maybe we can figure it all out before something really bad happens. You and Hermione need to work together. Between the both of you, I'd be ready to take on Voldemort tomorrow. Daphne blushed lightly at the compliment. Mr. Potter, you'll have to wait outside. I need to examine Miss Greengrass now. Madame Pomfrey said as she bustled over, waving her wand at the privacy screen. Harry stood and smiled at Daphne, who returned the smile. He let go of her hand and went out into the hall to wait. It had been an interesting conversation. Daphne had made a lot of sense. What if Dumbledore was preparing him for something larger? But what could he possibly be preparing him for, short of fighting Voldemort, which Harry knew he was nowhere even close to ready for? While he'd been training with Snape and Flitwick, and Harry was reasonably sure he could take on most of Voldemort's Death Eaters, he knew that if he faced Voldemort, he'd be dead within minutes. Harry remembered when Dumbledore had retrieved him from the Dursleys and had asked him to take private lessons with the headmaster. And how he'd been so excited to learn from the greatest wizard of the age. Harry then recalled his growing disappointment with what he was learning. Dumbledore never just told him anything. It was always some puzzle for Harry to solve. "Hey." Daphne's voice brought Harry from his thoughts. "You're free. Just have to take it easy, but yet. So, would you like to take me to lunch? I'm starving." "Are you sure you want to be seen with me in public? You remember what happened last time?" "Yeah, I do. I also know that it's going to be like that no matter what. So I should just get used to it." Daphne smiled, slipping her arm around Harry's. "All right then. Let's go get something to eat." "Please be careful, Harry," Hermione said as Harry was preparing to meet Snape and Dumbledore. "I will." Harry smiled. "I'll be back before you know it." "I can't believe all this." Ron shook his head. "I don't like it, you going off without us." "I know how you feel." Harry nodded. "But I'll be okay. I'm with Dumbledore, and even though he hates me, I seriously doubt Snape would let anything happen to me. If he truly wanted to, he's had ample opportunity." Ron grimaced, but nodded. He gripped Harry's hand, and gave a significant look to his best friend. Harry returned the unspoken sentiment and hugged Hermione. He heard a small sniffle and released her, and left Gryffindor Tower. As Harry made his way to the entrance hall to meet with the two professors, he was able to reflect on the day he'd had. It was something he never had imagined in all his life. It had been bliss. He and Daphne had entered the Great Hall just as lunch was beginning. Harry had known exactly what was going to happen as they stepped through the giant oak doors. Every single set of eyes turned and instantly the whispering began. Harry looked to Daphne, who was looking between the Slytherin and Gryffindor tables. She had never eaten at another table, and she knew that she and Harry would be scrutinized as they ate, and would be unable to talk at all. So, the blonde girl led Harry to his own house table. Daphne had found the looks of shock on the faces of the Gryffindors quite hilarious. Hermione and Ron welcomed them, and Ron saluted her for attempting to get rid of Draco. Harry still felt a bit of a thrill as he remembered how Daphne had held his hand under the table all through lunch, and the little looks she had given him. For the first time in all his life, Harry had felt normal. Like a regular teenage boy, enjoying spending time with a girl that he liked. After lunch, he and Daphne had gone to the library as Daphne needed to redo her defense essay that had burned up the night before. Harry helped find the books she needed, and even though the homework was important, Daphne had accomplished very little. Harry felt himself burn crimson when he thought of how the pair had shared several kisses while looking for books and how Daphne had given up trying to write her essay and the two had taken a walk throughout the castle. As Harry descended the last staircase, leading to the entrance hall where he could see both professors waiting expectantly for him, Daphne's words echoed in his head. "Wherever it is you're going tonight, please be careful. We've still got so much to do together." And then she had kissed him. A very long and passionate kiss. It was like the kiss they had shared the night before. A kiss that told them both that something was happening between them, something good. Harry's smile was huge as he joined the two professors. He would be careful, and he would pay attention to every single detail, and he would come back to Daphne. He needed to. Harry knew now that his feelings for Daphne were becoming stronger. In just a matter of hours, they had become a couple, and it wasn't because of some stupid contract. They had chosen to come together, to be together, to allow themselves to care for each other. Harry needed to come back to Daphne because he was falling in love. Daphne was sitting alone in her dorm, watching the clock. She felt a shiver of anxiety when the clock turned 8:01. Harry had gone. He'd gone on some dangerous expedition with the headmaster to retrieve a Horcrux. A piece of Voldemort's soul. Daphne still shivered at the thought of the evil wizard, and chastised herself for it. She had just had the best day in her life, and wanted more than anything to have another. She had stood tall and proud when they had entered the Great Hall together. She had decided that no matter what anyone said, all that truly mattered was what she and Harry thought. He had been so patient, and kind, and generous. He had gone to the library with her so she could finish her essay. He had no homework to finish, but had been willing to get all the books she needed, and sit quietly while she worked. Daphne had found the closeness too much a distraction. She'd never had a boyfriend before. Someone she could kiss whenever she wanted, and she had taken full advantage of it. She would send him to find a book, and then follow him. She made sure no one was watching, and then she would grab Harry and snog him until he couldn't see straight. After an hour of this, she had realized she wasn't getting any work done. So she had packed her things and they had spent the rest of the afternoon strolling through the castle, and snogging. Oh, there had been a lot of snogging. Daphne felt her toes curl just thinking about how Harry had held her and ran his fingers through her hair. Even when they said nothing and just stood together, she had felt so exhilarated. He had walked her down to the dungeons after dinner. He had an hour to get ready for his night, and they had just a few short moments left. She had looked him deep in the eyes when they reached the entrance to the Slytherin common room. It was then that she knew that she was falling for him. As much as she had tried not to, as much as she'd denied her feelings, she knew it now. Daphne was beginning to fall for Harry Potter. You do what you have to do tonight, and then you come back here. I want to see you at breakfast tomorrow morning, Potter. Wherever it is you're going tonight, please be careful. We've still got so much to do together, she had said. And then she drew him closer, holding onto him tightly as she poured all of her feelings into that last kiss. She wanted him to remember that moment. She wanted him to think of her before he tried to play the hero. She wanted him to know, without having to say it, that she, Daphne Greengrass, was falling in love with Harry Potter. Hope you enjoy. Please like and subscribe.